Thank you for this interview, Peter. Europe is facing a difficult period, an era of polycrisis, according to some analysts. The post-pandemic tension, the war in Ukraine, the refugees problem, economic and energy crisis, the increasing the cost of life. All these problems encourage authoritarian regimes and their supporters to attack democracy and European values. From this point of view, what are the major challenges you had to face in the last period?
For journalists, I think it's a very difficult time, and the time that more than before asks us to be experts on certain issues. So if you wanted to cover, for example, the corona crisis correctly, we had to learn a lot about health politics. Same refers to the refugee crisis. We have to understand why people flee from their countries. And even regarding the war in Ukraine, it is not only about an aggression by Russia towards Ukraine, and if you want to say the whole Western world and Western Europe, it's also about the backgrounds, the history of this part of Europe. So journalists have to become experts on the fields they are covering, and of course this is very challenging.
What is the most effective way to confront this challenge?
Oh, I would say the different crises ask for different solutions. But you have to be sincere. You have to try to explain your audience what is going on. And of course, in every single political field, there are some interests behind, and I think being a journalist, you have to look behind the interests and be critical towards the politicians, even if they are working under much pressure and if they are working under the conditions of a national crisis, what, for example, the corona crisis have been, or also the war is. But you should not be on the same side as the politicians are. You should stay on the side of your audience, of the ordinary citizens who have to understand what is going on.
Journalism implies pluralism. Democracy is based on pluralism. Does this mean that we must give space to all voices, including those who promote authoritarian regimes, who talk about the rise of East and decline of the West, for example?
I have to say, and I want to say, that the spectrum of opinions we present to the public on our platforms in television or online or in the press has to be very broad. Democracy is about plurality. Democracy is about conflict. Democracy is about discussion. So let's organize discussions. It does not make any sense if you just present the people that have the same opinion as you have. But having said this, and having made clear my standpoint, I also have to admit that I personally have difficulties of giving people a window to the world who, with their attitudes, are really enemies to democracy. And this is what we are facing. We are facing a surge of populism. It came even from the heart of Western democracies in the US, but it's everywhere. It has been in the United Kingdom. I think there's a big danger of populism coming back in France, and even we in Germany have a very extremist, reactionary, nationalist party who might win in our regional elections in the next years.
Should they have a voice, the populist, for example, in TV programs?
We have established the following rule. If we are covering discussions in the parliament, for example, and if these people are represented in the government, they have to be present in the news with shortcut sound bites. They have to be there because they have been elected. But in formats where we as journalists are freer to make a selection who we present, we must really look at every single person, And his position or her position, if our, I won't talk about feeling, but if our assessment, if our judgment is if this is an enemy of democracy or not, and then we can make our judgment.
Who decides this? Who decides who is an enemy of democracy? It's the decision of editorial board or a producer or a moderator decision?
I would say it should not be a decision by only one person. Of course, there are some institutions in the society that can help. For example, we in Germany, we have an institution which is called the people who protect the Constitution. So
civil one?
Yes, and if they regard one special party and come to the conclusion that they are enemies of the Constitution, this might be one aspect of the decision the editors are taking. And then you have to organize discussions with your colleagues. So it should not be one man's decision. Discuss it with your board, discuss it with your colleagues, and then, then you have to do it.
I'll give you another example in order to be more clear. The Russophile propaganda.
Yeah.
Those who justify and sustain the war. Do we have to listen to these voices, to invite them in the programs?
I would say yes, but on the other hand, we have to have experts who give the other angle. And I think we as Democrats, we don't have to be insecure about ourselves and about our arguments. I think that our audience is more intelligent than we often think about them. So yes, in a question like the war, the Russian motives, or even in the discussions about is COVID really existing or not, why not integrate somebody who is opposing? I'm sure that the exchange of arguments will help the society to make up its mind if to whom we give the space.
Most of the manipulation, disinformation, fake news is spread on social network, on
yes.
this platform, in online. Is present in online press media. Do we need regulation on these platforms, like we have in the old
yes.
media?
I would say, of course, we need. And I see two different layers of how we should react. First reaction is that I will call it serious media, like public media, like common interest oriented press media should be on social media too, because we should leave this field to the other people, and we should trust in that the audience is intelligent enough to make a difference and to understand what is right and what is wrong. On the other hand, we should not be naive. And it's true that the algorithm really pays more attention to conflict, to battle, to the things that are energizing the society than to the ordinary truth. So yes, I think we need some regulation. We need some people who watch over what is published, but of course we don't need kind of a big censorship organization which could betray our own democratic beliefs and convictions. So we have to force the platforms themselves to build up a kind of supervisory boards, and this is, I would say, a duty that should not be done by the state or by state-or institutions, but by independent boards.
What should be the relation between the public media and the officials and the authorities in in this fight against disinformation and fake news?
We have two different roles in democracies. So politicians and journalists live on two different sides of the barrier. And although we are fighting maybe for the same common interest and for the same overall goals like democracy and peace and welfare and safety of the people, the role of a journalist is being a professional critical. Meanwhile, a politician has the role to fight for the interest of his party and so on. So I would talk about a respectful distance, and we as journalists have to be aware not to be bribed by the power, and as I know from my experience, this is not so easy.
Yes, because many times authorities complain about the news in the programs, in public media. There are too much negative news, and they say that should be more positive.
I would say
news.
This is the.
What do you think?
I would say this is the difference between a liberal and an authoritarian regime or public order. I mean, especially in Eastern Europe and in Eastern Germany, we have had many years, many decades of positive recording in the news. We've heard about new records in the harvesting season. We have heard about progress in the automotive industry. Is this really interesting in democratic times? No, I think we have to stick to the rule that news is about criticism, news is about things that don't go in the right direction, news goes in the direction of surprise, something that did not happen before, crisis, and so on. And you know, a television program does not consist only about news. There are other windows that can open, and of course there are other formats like magazine formats, documentaries, that can show what goes in the right direction in a society. But as a principle for the news, I think journalists have to stick to criticism.